Church bells rang softly, echoing across the small town of Charleston, South Carolina. Inside St. Mary's Chapel, the fragrance of roses filled the air, mingling with the nervous breaths of guests seated neatly in polished pews. The bride, Emily Parker, stood at the entrance, her veil shimmering like a soft cloud in the sunlight that poured through stained glass windows. Her heart pounded, not just from nerves, but from the weight of the moment. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She had dreamed of it since she was a little girl, rehearsed it in her mind countless times, and now the dream was here, real, tangible, and terrifyingly fragile. But as she took her first step down the aisle, her eyes lifted toward the man waiting at the altar. Ryan Turner, her fiancé, the love of her life, the man she had trusted with her heart, her secrets, her future. And in that moment when their eyes met, she wanted to smile, to breathe out the fear, to believe everything was as perfect as it looked. But then she saw it. Ryan's lips curled, not at her, but at someone else. A smirk, a knowing, smug expression thrown across the rows of guests. Emily's heart stilled as her gaze followed his, and she found the recipient of that smirk, a woman seated 3 rows from the front, her red dress almost scandalous among the pastels and whites of the wedding crowd. The woman smiled back, eyes locking with Ryan's for a beat too long, like a conversation happening in silence. Emily felt the ground beneath her tilt, her chest tightening as though all the air had been sucked out of the church. The aisle felt longer than ever, the weight of her dress suffocating. In that second, she knew something wasn't right. Before I go deeper into Emily's journey, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Emily somehow reached the altar, her trembling hands resting on Ryan's. To everyone else, they looked like a radiant couple beginning their forever. But inside, Emily was spiraling. Each word spoken by the priest blurred in her ears. Her eyes flicked again to the woman in red. She wasn't just a guest. She was a shadow lurking in the daylight, a secret that threatened to shatter everything. Emily remembered the months leading up to this day. She had sacrificed so much for Ryan. She worked double shifts at the local hospital as a nurse while he built his startup dream. She had been his cheerleader, his partner, his comfort when the world weighed too heavily. But Ryan had grown distant lately. Late-night phone calls, vague explanations, and distracted smiles. She had brushed it off as stress. Now standing there, her suspicions hardened into a painful truth. That smirk wasn't innocent. The ceremony continued, but Emily's mind raced. She saw flashes of the life she was about to step into. The promises, the vows, the illusions of forever that could collapse like paper in the rain. She thought of her parents, seated proudly in the front row, believing their daughter was stepping into happiness. She thought of her younger sister Lily, who had always looked up to her, believing love was worth fighting for. And most of all, she thought of herself, her worth, her dreams, her heart that deserved more than half-truths and hidden glances. When it was time for the vows, Ryan took her hands and spoke with confidence, his voice steady and practiced. He talked about love, about loyalty, about a life built together. But Emily could no longer hear his words. They were hollow like echoes in a cavern. She stared at him, and then at the woman in red, who smirked again, as if daring her to notice. And Emily did notice. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to open her eyes fully. When the priest turned to Emily, asking her to speak her vows, a silence fell across the chapel. Everyone expected her to smile through tears of joy and recite the promises she had prepared. Instead, Emily drew in a sharp breath and looked straight into Ryan's eyes. She felt the courage rise within her, not from anger, but from love for herself and the truth she could no longer deny. She let her veil fall back, revealing her face fully. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling yet clear enough for the room to hear. Gasps rippled through the pews, whispers darting from guest to guest. Ryan's confident expression faltered, his smirk wiped away in an instant. Emily turned to the priest. "I cannot make vows to a man whose heart isn't fully mine." The chapel erupted in confusion. Her mother covered her mouth in shock. Her father stood frozen, and Ryan stammered, reaching for her hands. "Emily, what are you?" But Emily pulled back, steadying her voice now. "I saw the way you looked at her," she said, her voice stronger, pointing her eyes toward the woman in red. "On the day you should only see me, only love me, only promise yourself to me, you gave your smile to another, and I will not begin a marriage built on lies, divided hearts, or stolen glances." The silence that followed was unbearable yet liberating. Ryan's face flushed with panic, denial spilling from his lips. The woman in red looked down, guilt evident. Emily knew she had struck the truth. With tears streaming, she turned to the guests and then back to her family. "I deserve love that is whole, that is loyal, that is proud to stand beside me with no shadows lingering behind. And today I choose myself." Emily walked away. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, her veil trailing like a banner of strength. The doors of the chapel opened, sunlight pouring in as she stepped outside, tears falling freely, but her spine unbroken. Behind her, chaos reigned, guests murmuring, Ryan pleading, her parents rushing after her. But Emily kept walking, each step lighter than the last. That day was supposed to be her wedding, but it became something far greater. It was the day she reclaimed her worth. It was the day she proved that love without respect is not love at all, and that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is to walk away before her heart is destroyed. The days that followed were not easy. Emily faced judgment from some relatives who thought she should have stayed, who whispered about the scandal of a runaway bride. She battled loneliness in the quiet of her apartment, where the silence screamed louder than words. But with each passing day, she grew stronger. Her family, once shocked, rallied around her. Her sister Lily hugged her tightly one night and whispered, "You showed me what courage looks like." Emily poured herself into her work at the hospital, where she cared for patients with a compassion that came from her own brokenness. And slowly her heart began to heal. She started journaling, writing letters to herself about resilience and self-love. She went for walks by the riverside, breathing in the freedom she had chosen. And one evening, as the sun dipped low, she realized she no longer felt regret, only gratitude that she had chosen the harder path that led to her dignity. Months later, Emily ran into someone from the wedding, a friend who had been there that day. He told her, "People will never forget what you did. They said you taught them something about courage." Emily smiled softly, realizing that her pain had become her testimony, her story had become her strength, and her choice had become her freedom. She knew love might come again someday, but this time she would enter it with eyes wide open, with boundaries unshakable, and with a heart unwilling to settle for less than what it deserved. She no longer saw herself as the bride who walked away. She saw herself as the woman who chose truth over illusion, strength over silence, and dignity over deception. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Leave a comment below about what part of Emily's journey inspired you most. Your engagement helps us spread more stories of courage, love, and second chances. And before we end, here's a special request. Comment the words "True love respects" if you believe every heart deserves loyalty and honesty. Emily's story reminds us that sometimes the most unthinkable choice becomes the most powerful one. And in choosing herself, she taught us all that love should never come with conditions, secrets, or divided hearts. True love, after all, is whole, or it is nothing.